Hi there, this is Marlene Dinarius here from Latinum, and before we start looking at this Riddle and Arnold's copious and critical English to Latin dictionary, a little bit about my Patreon, where there is a free Latin reading course available in PDF. You don't even need to be a member of my Patreon to access it. There are 30 lessons available at the moment. Actually, there's a bit more than that because there also is consolidation material. This course is unique because it's constructed along the lines of word frequency tables for Latin, which means that quite complex grammatical ideas are, of necessity, introduced very early on, but using very simple Latin, as much as simple Latin as possible, given the complexity, the grammatical complexity. Now, this is interesting because the word frequency tables give us an indication of how little children would have spoken Latin, because they would have been exposed to these words in their frequent forms, and therefore they would have been exposed to the complex grammar from a very, very young age. And the way that most grammar textbooks for Latin teach it is they sort of protect these so-called difficult things, introduce them much, much later on. But this wasn't a natural way of being exposed to the language. Now, to make this possible, because it's a rather tall order to jump into some of these complex forms at the beginning, I've used a 17th century technique. Actually, it's even earlier. Find it in texts from the 16th century, called a construed text. And this is a text where the English and Latin are presented phrase by phrase, following one another. So it's a way to read the Latin with the translation, and this is done in part A. So you can learn the vocabulary, get to grips with the material. Then in part B of the same lesson, the material is given sentence by sentence, a complete sentence in Latin, complete sentence in English. And then in part C, it's repeated in Latin only. And if you are stuck at this point and not sure, you go back and read over part A and part B and then go back to part C. Part D is a grammatical explanation of how things work. And indeed, the very first lesson is only one word. And then we slowly increase the amount of words and the complexity of the material. And I invite you to go to Patreon and have a look at this, and if you are interested in it, you can subscribe there as a free member. And if you subscribe as a free member, then whenever I upload something, you will get a little notification. Now let's have a look at this dictionary definition from Riddle and Arnold's Copious and Critical English to Latin Dictionary, written at the end of the 1700s, published in the early 1800s. So the English in it is rather antiquated, which is why I am here to help you with the English, more than with the Latin actually. Famous, inclutus, or inclutus, known by name, of note, remarkable. Celebratus, celebrated, praised. Illustris, per illustris, that shines forth before others, distinguished. Clarus, prae clarus, that has stepped forth out of obscurity, out of the darkness. Distinguished, someone that's climbed out from under a rock into the bright light of day. Clarus, according to its signification, according to its meaning, frequently with a word joined to it. Clarus gloria, clarus bello, clarus pace. Nobilis, known, of note in the world, known by report among mankind, by service, by knowledge, and so on and so forth. Nobilis et clarus. Celeber, much visited and sought after and much spoken of, is used of places at which there is a great concourse of men and of teachers who have a large auditory, in other words, a large audience. In the Golden Age, famosus only has the meaning of infamous, the exact opposite of what it would mean, and so it is a very, very false friend. Very famous. Illustri laude celebratus, claritate praestans, famous for learning, nobilis et clarus ex doctrina. To be famous, gloria florere, este in laude. To be very famous, gloria circumfluere, omnium sermone celebrari, in magno nomine et gloria esse, magna celebritate famae esse. To be very famous as a speaker, magnum in oratoribus nomen habere. Magnum in oratoribus nomen habere. He is famous far and wide. He is famous everywhere, even in Jupiter. Eius nomen longatque late vagatur. To become famous, nominis famam adipisci, gloriam consequi, or gloriam assequi, or in gloriam venire, or in claritudinem pervenire, crescere. Clarescere and inclarescere belong to the Silver Age. To become famous by way of anything. Illustrari aliqua re. Clarum fieri re or ex re. To render famous, celebrare, illustrare, nobilitare. This also of an event or an occurrence, as of a battle which renders a place famous. Quam et quod. So, nobilitare aliquam or aliquod. Gloriae commendare. Gloria afficere aliquam, of a deed. And then illustrem reddere aliquam. To make oneself famous. Gloriam sibi acquirere, gloriam sibi comparare, or famam sibi acquirere, famam sibi comparare, claritudinem sibi parare. To desire to make oneself famous, gloriam quaerere, gloriam sequi, famae studere, famae servire, famae inservire. So that's the entrance, or entry rather, under famous from Riddle and Arnold's copious and critical English to Latin dictionary. Hope you enjoyed that. Please check out my Patreon. I'm not really asking you to subscribe there. I have a lot of subscribers, but if you want to subscribe, feel welcome to subscribe. But do subscribe as a free member if you would like to keep updated with my lessons. And of course that gives me encouragement, because the more people subscribe as free members, the more I know that my free Latin course is being used, which gives me great pleasure. So do that if you will, and if you are so inclined, you can subscribe as a paying member, but I'm not asking you to do it because there are enough of those at my Patreon. Bye.